Governments are outsourcing war, not to other governments, to private companies. Companies with their own soldiers, their own weapons, their own agendas, and no accountability to the people they operate among. The rise of private armies is one of the most significant and least discussed shifts in modern geopolitics, and it is accelerating. This is AxisShift. For most of modern history, war was considered the exclusive domain of the state. Governments built armies. Governments declared wars. Governments were held responsible for what happened on the battlefield. That model is breaking down. Today, a growing number of governments, unable or unwilling to commit their own forces, are turning to private military companies, PMCs, groups of professional soldiers operating outside the traditional military chain of command, for hire, for profit, with plausible deniability built in, because private armies allow governments to project power without political backlash at home. The company that brought this shift into global focus was the Wagner Group. Founded in Russia, Wagner operated as an unofficial extension of the Kremlin, giving Moscow the ability to project military power around the world while maintaining the fiction that Russia was not involved. At its peak, Wagner fielded 30,000 soldiers, more than the active armies of most European nations. They became the first private company to conquer a European city in 500 years, seizing Bakhmut in Ukraine in 2023. Across 13 countries in Africa, they protected regimes, trained local forces, secured mineral resources, and eliminated political opponents. All of it under the cover of plausible deniability. If Wagner committed atrocities, Russia could say it had nothing to do with them. If Wagner secured a mining concession, Russia benefited without appearing to. It was a model of geopolitical influence unlike anything the world had seen before. Then, in June 2023, Wagner's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, launched a brief armed mutiny against the Russian military leadership, marching his forces toward Moscow before standing down. Within months, Prigozhin was dead. His plane fell from the sky. Wagner, as a brand, effectively ceased to exist. But the model it pioneered did not. Russia replaced Wagner with a new state-controlled group, the Africa Corps, which has absorbed much of Wagner's personnel and taken over its operations across the African continent. The vacuum Wagner left was filled almost immediately, because the demand for private military capability is not going away, and Russia is not alone. The United States pioneered the modern private military industry through companies like Blackwater, which deployed tens of thousands of contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan. At the height of those wars, private contractors outnumbered U.S. military personnel in theater. The model is not uniquely Russian. It is a global trend, and it raises questions that governments and international institutions are struggling to answer. When a private army commits a war crime, who is responsible? When a mercenary company controls a government's security forces, who does that government actually answer to? When private soldiers extract natural resources in exchange for their services, is that trade or exploitation? Because private armies do not just fight wars, they reshape political systems. In Mali, the Wagner Group, and now the Africa Corps, helped a military junta consolidate power after a coup. French and UN forces were expelled. Western influence was replaced by Russian influence. And a country rich in gold and uranium came under the orbit of a foreign power through private military contractors, not conventional diplomacy. This is the new geopolitics, Not armies clashing on defined battlefields, but private forces operating in the shadows, securing resources, propping up governments, undermining adversaries, with states maintaining deniability every step of the way. And as artificial intelligence and drone technology advance, private military companies are gaining access to capabilities that were once the exclusive domain of major powers. Autonomous weapons, surveillance technology, cyber capabilities. The barriers between state and private military power are eroding. So what does this mean for the world? A future where war is increasingly privatized is a future where accountability disappears, where the laws of armed conflict, built over centuries to constrain the worst of human violence, become increasingly difficult to enforce, where the line between a soldier, a mercenary, and a criminal becomes impossible to draw. The rise of private armies is not just a military story. It is a story about who controls force in the modern world. Because once violence becomes a service that can be purchased, power itself changes hands. And right now, the answer to who controls that power is becoming increasingly complicated. Subscribe to AxisShift, because the world is turning and you should know which way.